Hey gang, welcome to this week's High Value Publishing session. My name is Eric Shanfelt. I've been doing digital media for over 30 years now. And today we're going to dive into a topic that I think a lot of us kind of know, but I see a lot of publishers not really fully implementing. And this is, how do we get full credit for traffic that we send to our advertisers' websites? Now, this is from a variety of different sources, and I have to do a shout out to one of my audience here sent me this as an idea, a question in the Ask Me Anything forum just last week. So thank you so much for sending this in. This is a fantastic topic. Before we dive in, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel or listening to the podcast, be sure to go to nearviewmedia.com. Sign up for the email newsletter so you get notified of these sessions or the recordings when they become available. All right, well, let's dive on in and talk about how you do get credit for advertiser traffic that you're sending. So we send traffic to advertisers in a large variety of ways, right? We have editorial coverage that we may do on our website. Then we run ads on our website through our own ad system, whatever that happens to be, Google Ad Manager, BroadStreet, AdvertServe, whatever it may happen to be. We do email ads, whether it's ads in our email newsletter or one-off dedicated emails, e-blasts, if you were. I don't like that term, by the way. I like the term dedicated email. But we'll do email sends, either in our newsletters or dedicated sends. Social media. Sometimes we will do organic social media mentions of an advertiser if it fits an editorial need, usually. Oftentimes we're doing co-branded social media campaigns where we're running social media ad campaigns, Meta, LinkedIn, whatever. And we're doing that on our own, and we're sending traffic to the advertiser, and we're remarketing to our audiences maybe. Sometimes we'll be doing programmatic display ads, like we're remarketing to our audience through programmatic display networks, whether that be everything from just plain programmatic display remarketed to our audience or even geofenced ads, things like that. But we have all these different ways that we're driving traffic back to our advertisers. The big problem, though, is if we don't do this right, we're not really going to get credit in our advertisers' Google Analytics. Now, we can send reports, right? So we could try to, send some reports from coverage we've done here, only if you're tracking outbound links. We can send reports from our ad system. We can send reports from our email system, or maybe you're tracking this through your ad system. We can send reports from Meta or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it may happen to be. We can send reports from a programmatic ad display network. But all of that really doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter. It's important. But this can all be solved using the advertiser's Google Analytics. So here's how it kind of looks for most publishers that I work with. There are some publishers who've already mastered this, and good on you, but a lot haven't. So there's this hidden traffic in Google Analytics. This is one example that was from one of my clients a couple years ago. They were sending all kinds of traffic to one of their customers, but it was all being hidden in here, right? So when you go into Google Analytics, you can go under acquisition, all traffic, and then you can find source medium. If it's not there, you can enable that report. But you go to source medium, this says exactly what is the source of that traffic and the medium through which that traffic came. This is really critical, and you should teach your advertisers how to look at this in their Google Analytics, but not until after you've been doing this for a while and you've been properly coding your links to show up here. So here's an example of all the traffic that was being hidden in Google Analytics. They had ads on their website. The ads were not being tagged. And so all the ad traffic was being lumped into this direct none segment here because there was no tracking. It was just going from the ad system right over into their website, no attribution. They happen to be using ActiveCampaign as their email, but I've seen this with MailChimp and HubSpot and Omeda and other things like this, where it would say ActiveCampaign or HubSpot or MailChimp or Omeda and email instead of your publication name. They were seeing traffic from mentions on organic social and even paid social campaigns were coming through Facebook referral right? Or LinkedIn referral instead of coming from you. So that's the biggest problem here. That's the hidden traffic that we're sending to our advertisers, and we're not getting credit for it. So this is what proper accreditation does look like in analytics. So went through and we changed how they did things, right? So now we're making sure that any email we send out is using our domain as the source and then email as the medium. If we're doing ads on our website, we're using our domain and then the ads on the website. If we're using a social media mention or a paid social media ad, we're using our domain and social or paid social as the medium. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll talk a little about visits from their website. We're just coming as our domain slash referral because it's coming over from a website. But what we taught our advertisers to do was to go into Google Analytics, go into source medium, and in the little search box, type in your brand name, your domain. In this case, type in LBM Journal. And it filters everything and shows everything we're sending them from email, from their ad programs, from social media mentions, from paid social, from organic referrals on our website, editorial mentions, to everything else that we're doing. We're actually finally getting proper credit in our advertisers' Google Analytics. And that makes them happy, and that makes them want to buy again from us. That's why this is so important. So, how do we do this? How do we set these parameters properly? Well, you probably have all heard this before. If you haven't, welcome to UTM parameters. All right. If anybody's on the chat, you may have already known this because I've said it before in previous webinars way back when. What does the UTM stand for? What does UTM stand for? You will see this in a lot of campaigns like UTM source, UTM medium, UTM campaign. If anybody knows what the UTM stands for, pop that in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm really curious to see if you guys know what that is. But what UTM parameters do, they tell Google Analytics how to attribute the referral, how to attribute the source of that traffic, right? So in this case here, they were linking out to this, carriagecsna.com website, but they were saying the campaign source was their domain. The campaign medium, they said banner or display, whatever you want to use, and the campaign name was right here. This creates, when you put this in here, this outputs a URL. And then this is the URL that you will use in your ad system. This is the URL that you will use in your email newsletter ad. This is the URL that you will use in your dedicated email. This is the ad you will use in your organic social link or your paid social ad campaign or your programmatic display campaign. You will use this URL, not this URL. Okay? Because if you just did that, you're going to be back up in this problem with all this hidden traffic. But if you do the UTMs properly, you're going to get proper credit out here. So it's UTM parameters. You can just search for, I think it's called Google Campaign Builder, Google UTM Builder, anything like that. If you do a search for that, you will find that page. So here it is, and you can see we're working on here. This was another ad campaign. The campaign source was a publication called Insight. It was a paid medium, a campaign name, and we came out with this URL. And that's what we used for that campaign. So this is the answer. It's using UTM parameters. Now, let's talk about some suggested combinations of sources and mediums. And I'm using these very specifically because these specific mediums also then roll up into something that Google calls channels. Right? If you go back here, you can see there's this source and medium. So the source should be the brand where the traffic came from. Okay, think of that source is the brand. Medium should be exactly that. Is it email? Is it display? Is it social? Is it paid social? Is it referral traffic? What is it? Is it organic search clicks? What is it? And then that wraps up into these mediums wrap up into these high-level channels like organic search, organic social, paid search, paid social, display advertising, right? Email, it wraps up into higher levels. So think of it as The source is the name of the brand that sent the traffic. The medium is the medium through which the traffic came, and then medium gets rolled up into these channels, and that's the difference that we have here. So here are the suggested source mediums. This will be available on our website here probably by Thursday this week, so you're welcome to look at it. Take a screenshot if you want. This will all be out there. But if you're using any editorial links on your website, if you're linking to an actual client on your website, you don't need to add UTMs to the URL. Google Analytics recognizes links from websites and will come through as your domain, as the source, and referral as the medium, right? So they'll see lbmjournal.com/referral, for example, right? That's what was this down here. This was organic mentions in articles on their website. I want to make a little clarification. I'll probably pop this into the article on Thursday. There's a difference between editorial links and editorial mentions on your website and sponsored content. If you're using sponsored content, we're probably going to want to keep LBM Journal as the source, but we'll use a different medium. So I'll do some thought on that, and I'll post that for you guys on the article on my website on Thursday. So I think I do want to differentiate between editorial links and sponsored content links, because that's a campaign that we're going to want to make sure that we're able to track. So that thought just hit my mind. Now, some of you will redirect those kind of links through something like an ad tracker. Maybe you'll do an ad pixel link or an ad tracking link or a Broad Street sponsored content link. You may not need to do this then. That'll come out otherwise. Ads on your website. So whether you're serving up through Google Ad Manager, through AdvertServe, through Broad Street, through advanced ads, whatever you may happen to be using, you want to use your domain name as a source. And by the way, you don't have to use the full .com. You could just do like LBM Journal, right? Or my company, Nearview Media. Right? I don't have to use the .com. You can if you want. You don't have to. The key is, what do I tell my client to search for? If I told them to search for LBM Journal, okay, this could be the referral, but then everything else could just be plain LBM Journal. Kind of like you see here, right? They didn't put lbmjournal.com, lbmjournal.com. Just put the brand name. You can if you want to, you don't have to. But for ads that you're using, so in your ad system, do not link just to the advertiser website. Instead, you want to link to the advertiser website and add a UTM source of LBM Journal and a UTM medium of display. I would also recommend that you use a UTM campaign, right? So campaign is another parameter that comes in here that you can search for in Google Analytics, but it would be the name of the campaign that they're running with you for their ads. So that's what I would use there. Email, same thing. Whether it's newsletters, whether it's a dedicated blast, you would use your domain as the source, email as the medium, and then you can use the campaign, right? For all of these, other than editorial links, for all of these, you should be using a campaign name as well, a campaign UTM, so you can differentiate which campaign actually sent this traffic in there. Oh, be sure to override any default UTM settings from your email system. If you go back here to this, the default UTM parameters for active campaign links, for example, is active campaign as the source and email as the medium. Okay, that's fine if I'm sending traffic to my own website, because I know we use active campaign. But if I'm sending traffic to an advertiser website, they have no idea who active campaign is, or may not. So I want to make sure I override the default UTM settings. And HubSpot does this, Omeda does this, MailChimp does this, they all do it. Override the default UTM parameters on that link to make sure that you are putting in your name, LBM Journal, or whatever your brand is, /email. Okay, that's pretty important. Organic social mentions. This is really important because if you think about it, there really is no source. Now, if I'm on the web version, the desktop web version of a social media platform, and I click through, all right, I'm going to get some referral traffic. But it's going to come from, again, it's going to come from Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, not from you. The other important thing is if you don't put a UTM parameter, if I'm in the LinkedIn app on my phone or the Facebook app on my phone or whatever social media platform, and I click to the advertiser website, if I do not include UTMs, sometimes it won't even come through as being from that social media network at all. It'll just get lumped in this whole direct none because there isn't, I'm not coming from a website. There's no referral. I'm coming directly from an app. So therefore, it's a none source. So make sure that we utilize, again, in organic social, our domain as the source and social as the medium. Social means organic, social. Okay. Diving on. Social media ads. Let's say I'm running an ad on LinkedIn through my brand, remarketing to my audience, co-branded social advertising, or I'm doing it on Meta. Again, I want to use my domain as the source, not the name of the social media network, my domain as a source. This is my ad campaign, my brand doing this for you. And I want to use paid-social as the medium. In this case, LBM Journal / paid social. So LBM Journal is a source and paid social. You're noticing a pattern here. Everything that I send traffic to my advertiser's website from, I want it to be branded with my domain as the source. And then I'll use the medium to differentiate specific mediums, and I'll use the campaign variable in the UTM parameters to differentiate specific campaigns. Same thing with programmatic display. Let's say you're remarketing to your audience on a programmatic display network, or let's say that you're doing some geofencing, which is basically programmatic display, but just remarketing in a geofenced area, whatever it happen to be. You, again, want to use your domain as the source, display as the medium, because that will roll up into paid advertising. This is the same thing that we will do on your website, right? We'll use your domain and display on both ads on your website and programmatic display ads. That's okay. You differentiate between the two of them using the campaign, the UTM campaign parameter. Okay, so that's the fundamentals. There are a couple of little caveats here. One of the things that was a great question that someone asked this week, sent in the request via the Ask Me Anything form. They said, "Hey, how are we doing attribution for social media campaigns? We're running campaigns on LinkedIn or on Facebook, but the advertisers don't see as much traffic in the GA reports as LinkedIn is showing us for clicks. How do we prove our audience is the right audience for running campaigns?" So I want to talk about a couple things. There will be differentiations, there will be differences. If you look at Meta reports or LinkedIn reports, you've got to make sure that you differentiate between clicks and link clicks. Two very, very different metrics. A lot of us, as publishers, we will look at clicks. Clicks in both Meta and LinkedIn are not just clicks to the ad link, to the link that we put in there, but clicks to the profile. Right? So if I go back and let's say it came out from LBM Journal, and I clicked on the LBM Journal profile, and with the LBM Journal profile instead of the ad link, it would count that as a click. Not a link click, but a click. If some social media platforms will even say, if you click a thumbs up, right? Or some sort of reaction emoji, or if you post a comment, or if you share the post, those are considered clicks. So you've got to be very, very careful that we're comparing apples to oranges. I'm sorry, apples to apples, not comparing apples to oranges on this, and making sure that we're looking at clicks that we're actually sending to the advertiser through links versus total links that social media ad networks may be reporting back to us. In addition, there is always going to be some differences between what your ad system says, what your email says, what your social media analytics say, what your social ads say, what your programmatic display ad system says are links versus what Google Analytics, the destination, says. This is not just for advertisers. This holds true on our own website. I'm sure a lot of you have run campaigns and you're like, gosh, Meta says I've got, 500 link clicks, but I only see 300 link clicks in Google Analytics. This is because of the stateless nature of the internet. They may indeed have clicked a link over here, but they didn't complete the session over here, right? For this to count as an actual link, an actual session in Google Analytics, the page has to load, Google Analytics tracking code has to load, and then it counts it as a click. So there will always be a discrepancy. As a matter of fact, if you remember way back to our Internet Advertising Bureau days, the IAB had said this is when a lot of people would run. We do have our ad system as a publisher. The agency or the advertiser would have their ad system, and we'd be pulling their tags. Their system would say one number, our system would say another number. The Internet Advertising Bureau itself said it is normal to have up to a 15% discrepancy between what your system says and what their system says. So just keep that in mind. There will always be some discrepancy between what the analytics says and what our own systems say. So keep that in mind. The other thing we've got to do is we've got to teach then our advertisers how to find this traffic, right? How do we find this traffic? So we've got to teach them that when we go to the all acquisition, all traffic source medium, do a search for our domain, LBM Journal, or whatever you're using as the attribution for the source. Do a search for that. And when you do a search for that, then you'll see all the traffic we're sending you. And it's kind of nice because the organic traffic you're sending them as part of an editorial organization, that's something we usually don't get credit for. And it's nice to show them the extra credit that we're getting for that and how we're driving traffic for them. All right, has anybody figured out what UTM stands for? No? All right. This will win you your next trivia contest at your work or wherever it is. UTM stands for Urchin Tracking Mechanism. Urchin Tracking Mechanism. So if anybody doesn't know this, Google Analytics, way back when, even before Google Analytics 3, Google Analytics was called Urchin. Google bought Urchin and turned it into Google Analytics. Then they relaunched it a couple years ago, came out with Google Analytics 4, which I can't stand, but we're stuck with it. And somehow Urchin lives on in the legacy of UTM parameters and Urchin tracking mechanism. So there you go. There's your trivia for the day. That's how you can get full credit for advertiser traffic. So I'm not seeing any questions coming through in the chat right now, and that's totally fine. Absorb all this. The one key thing that we've got to do to make this work, you've got to be consistent in your methodology, and you need to be deliberate in the execution. Your editors need to make sure they're using the right UTM parameters if they post organically about one of your companies. Your ad trafficking staff or person has to be absolutely certain that they are trafficking the right UTM parameters in the ad system to get credit. Your email production people have to use the right UTM parameters for ads if you're not pulling from an ad system in your email newsletters or in your direct e-blasts. Your production people on your website have to use the right UTM parameters when they're linking from a sponsored content piece back to the advertiser, right? Oh, one good question just came through. My advertiser sends us links with UTM parameters already in it. How do we handle that situation? Okay, that's a great question. So that can kind of break this. And oftentimes, I'll be honest, I see advertiser URL sending in UTMs that suck. They don't know how to use UTM parameters properly. So there's two things you could do. One thing is you just do it their way. And if you want to do it their way, that's fine. Do it their way. You're going to fragment your visibility in their Google Analytics, but it's the way they want to do it. Okay. The other process I like to take is go back and I kind of try to help educate my advertisers and say, hey, We'd like to do it this way to get UTM tracking. You can still track it. But by the way, this is a great way you might want to utilize for other advertisers as well. So we educate them. Been on a couple sales calls with a couple of my clients, and they actually appreciate that. They appreciate understanding that and knowing how to use UTM parameters properly. So that's a great question that just came up. Okay, here's a great question. What if this does not translate into ROI for the client? They only care about the amount of money they're spending versus what they're getting in return. Okay, that's a great question. I'm not quite sure what market you're in. So if you're able to pop that into the chat for me and let me know kind of what market you're in, that would help. If it's consumer, if it's B2B, what market specifically, that would help me understand this. But let's talk about this. You'll find this more in consumer, maybe a little bit, maybe some in B2B. ROI can mean a lot of things to a lot of folks. So is ROI getting people signed up for my email? Is ROI generating an inbound lead for my sales team? Is ROI, I spent X dollars with you, I expect X dollars in e-commerce sales back or bookings or whatever it may happen to be? This is a great question. It's actually a subject for a completely different high value publishing session, because what we're responsible for as publishers, we are responsible to get their message in front of the right people in a way that gives their message the ability to stand out and have impact and not be lost in a bunch of clutter, right? That's our responsibility as a publisher. We are not responsible for the number of clicks that they get. That is dependent upon their creative, their message, their call to action, right? If they just say, left-handed gold-plated plumber pickers, we're awesome, they're not going to get a lot of people clicking through. And then even beyond that, converting those people into sales, that's dependent upon their pipeline, upon their website, upon their lead generation. Now, there's things we can do beyond that. If we want to get into lead gen campaigns, we can have a whole session on lead gen campaigns and how we can do that. We can even get into lead nurturing campaigns, which a lot of B2B companies are beginning to do for advertisers. But when it comes to advertising, when it comes to display advertising on the website, email advertising, even dedicated email blasts, or our social media ads, our responsibility is to get their message in front of the right audience on the right platform in a method that is going to showcase their message well and not be lost in clutter. That's our responsibility. The click, and even more beyond that, the ROI, that's their responsibility. And we as publishers have to take the onus on that. It's a session I'd love to go into. I'm not going to have time today to dive real deep on this, but this is a big pet peeve of mine. We as publishers have to have this conversation. Say, hey, what kind of ROI can I expect from this ad? Well, it depends upon how good your product is, how good your message is on your creative, and what kind of incentive and call to action you give them in your creative. What's that going to be? And all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what? So that's what I'm coming back down to. But what this does, at least, this gives you the best opportunity to show that the clicks that are being generated are being attributed to you. So that's what this does here. That was a great question. I really appreciate that. But that's a session for a whole separate webinar. And I hope you understand, because that's going to be a deep dive on that one here. There's any other questions? We've got a minute or two left. Otherwise, I think we will call this one a wrap for today. I hope you found this valuable. Let me know if you're doing this. Drop me an email. I'd love to know if you're doing this, if it's been successful, if you have some modifications to my recommendations on this. I'd love to incorporate those into the article I publish on Thursday. Or if there's something you learned out of this that you're going to have your team implement going forward, I would love to know about that too. Thanks so much for dropping in, and we will see you next week. Cheers.